until this morning, and
Oh,
so I started reading at 5 o'clock. Like,
okay.
oh, that's a lot to get through.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we could have like cut it down because like I have to have kind of like a hard cut off this week because Aaron and I are going to see a doctor. So,
Well, so okay, let's start at chapter 50, wherein
cool.
Lydia turns out to be an entirely selfish, self-centered,
Oh my
clueless,
gosh.
shallow.
Uh,
eh,
like I really, really
It's
don't like Lydia,
yeah.
and nothing about her mom has made me like her anymore either.
So I was thinking about your noting the parallels between Mrs. Bennet and Lydia while I
Mm-hmm.
was reading this,
Mm-hmm.
and so in that case, if Mrs. Bennet is if Lydia is what Mrs. Bennet was like 26 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
does that mean that Mr. Bennet was essentially Wickham?
Um, gosh, I'd like to think no. I really would like to think no, but like at the very beginning of chapter 50, I'm looking at my first page, when Mr. Bennet had married, economy was held to be perfectly useless, for of course they were to have a son. The son was to join in cutting off the entail as soon as he should be of age, and the widow and younger would by that means be provided for. So like and then Mrs. Mrs. Bennet had no turn for economy, and her husband's love of independence had alone prevented their exceeding their income.
That's
Um,
probably a difference for Wickham.
right. Yeah, yeah. And then um, but it said he would. Where was it? There was somewhere it said that he wished more than ever that he had um been more frugal with
Yeah,
money. Maybe that was before I started.
I think it's very early on.
Yeah.
He now wished it more than ever. Had he
Hmm.
done his duty in that respect, Lydia need not now have been indebted to her uncle for whatever of honor or credit could now be purchased for her, and the satisfaction of prevailing on one of the most worthless young men in Great Britain to be her husband might then have rested in its proper place.
Yeah. Yeah, that was so I think probably not because like I think that Wickham when as he gets older will not grow like wiser or start wishing that he had managed his money better, but rather will just become more resentful with the world because you know the he continues to be unsatisfied and he had to get married early on and you know and that sort of thing.
Because it continues to fail to provide him with just magically having everything he wants.
Right.
Stupid world.
Stupid world indeed. Oh my gosh.
On the other hand, towards the end of that section of chapter 50,
Hmm.
I highlighted um, how little and permanent happiness could belong to a couple who were only brought together because their passions were stronger than their virtue, she could easily conjecture.
Yeah. No,
That, I suspect, might be a parallel to Mr. and Mrs. Bennet.
that
Like,
definitely is. Well, yeah, because she could easily conjecture because she saw her parents.
kind of seen it for 21 years.
Yeah. and it's just Mrs. Bennet, she's like so clueless. Like not only is suddenly her daughter being like having this awful marriage, like the best thing in the world that's ever happened to her, but now she's like looking for houses that nobody can afford, like
For
they're gonna live
at all.
there. And
Yeah.
and then she's surprised when Mr. Bennet is like, "Well, she's there's one house and that she's never gonna be allowed into, and that's this
Yeah.
one." And like
She was
Mrs.
more
Bennet's
alive.
like, "Why would you say it?" It's like her reaction is as though uh uh
She has no idea.
yeah, she reacts as though it was like a proper marriage, and suddenly Mr. Bennett's like, you know what? No, I don't like the guy. I'm just gonna not
But
gonna
yeah, right. Yeah.
allow her. And I'm like, that's not at all the
Totally
case.
understandable. Like,
Oh my
she was
gosh.
more alive to the disgrace which her want of new clothes must reflect on her daughter's nuptials than to any sense of shame at her eloping and living with Wickham a fortnight before they took place.
Yeah. Like, oh my gosh. And like and just in case anyone watches this, we're not neither of us is talking about like how it's still shameful to live with someone before you're married, because that's clearly not the point. We're arguing about it in the context of the society at the time.
Right.
And
Yeah. No.
the blindness to like this is like it's no commentary on the society. It's a commentary on the 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 almost willing negligence to understand or perceive like the social implications of
Reality.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and if Mrs. Bennet or Lydia was saying, you know what, this structure is sexist and it is absurd that should Lydia and Mr. Like, the problem here, they have to get Mr. Wickham to marry her and be legally bound to her.
Hmm.
Because if he just decides to up and leave, Lydia now lives in shame forever, and Mr. Wickham is scot free and can do anything he wants, which is
Right.
stupid. Right? This is a terrible system. And if Lydia was standing up and saying, this is a terrible system and I will not condone it by giving way to these pressures, that's different, right? I would be like, yes, you go, girl. But that's not what they're doing.
Yeah. No, that would definitely support her in that one. Oh my gosh. And then I mean, I like like in the middle of the chapter there's like just this little aside um that Elizabeth is still thinking about Darcy, because she's like, there's just no way. It's just no possible way. And like she
Right.
repented, though she hardly knew of what. I like that one because I understand that, where you're just like, I want to apologize to make things better, but I don't know what to apologize for. And like you're
Right.
trying to apologize to life sometimes. You're like, I'm sorry, whatever it was, I'll do better.
It's like, if I say I'm sorry, will it go away? Like,
Right.
I'll be really sorry if you can just, but like, there's nothing, there's no one you can make this deal with.
Hmm. Yeah, and then oh, and then later she's like musing and that like about how it's never going to happen, and the no such happy marriage between her and Darcy could teach the admiring multitude what connubial felicity really was. And I'm like, wow, she is deep. Like,
Yes. Well, and it's funny because like we had that chapter a while back where that ended with her and her aunt talking about everything except like their conversation centered around the thing they wanted to talk about, but not never actually
mhm,
talked about him. And Elizabeth is still in that frame of mind. Like, on the one hand, her sister's having this major disgrace and problem, and they're trying to figure out what they're going to do about it. And at the same time, like, a part of her is thinking about this, and a part of her is like, so how does that relate to Mr. Darcy?
mhm. Well, and even in this case, she's still not saying that she wants to be with him and marry him. Like, I think at one point, it's suggested that the proposal which she turned down might not be rejected at this point. But
Yeah,
she's still, it's still like, no such marriage could teach the admiring multitude about connubial felicity, and the um it was not supposed that Mr. Darcy would connect himself with a family. So it's like she's just sort of like now assumed that marriage, but like at no point has she ever said, I want to marry that guy or I would totally
Right.
marry that guy.
Right, but she's definitely got these like fantasies around him. Like she's spending all of her time thinking about, like, those thoughts only make sense if in the space in Elizabeth's head we're not seeing, she's spending all her time thinking about like getting married and living at Pemberley and hanging out with Darcy's sister, and like those daydreams are running through her head. It is the only thing that would cause these thoughts to make sense in what
Hmm.
we're actually seeing.
Yeah, Jane Austen is clearly like saying a lot by the things that she's not saying, but is reacting to.
Yes.
And then I also highlighted Mr. Wickham's intention was to go into the regulars, which I
Yeah.
think means like the enlisted militia or something. Like it's he's deciding to make it his like full-time profession, whereas maybe the other soldiers were like I don't know. I'm not sure what the regulars were.
Because I looked up a lot of money stuff. Um, I determined that if when they first got married, Mr. and Mrs. Bennet had set aside, I think it was £200 a year. Um, they would have had to live a little tightly for the size that their family ended up. Um, at like 85 or 90% of what they would be expected to live on.
Hmm.
If they had done that, they could have doubled Mrs. Bennet's marriage portion by the time that this story takes place.
Hmm.
So, anyway, I did a lot of looking up the money stuff,
Interesting.
but I didn't look up the.
I assume that it's like the full-time militia, and Wickham was in like what would basically be like the National Guard or something.
Huh. So, according to history, EnglishHistoryAuthors.blogspot.com, the militia served as a peacekeeping force on home soil, embodied only in wartime to free the regulars for combat abroad. In theory, they suppressed riots, broke up seditious gatherings, and if needed, repelled invading enemy forces. Unfortunately, it was not uncommon for members to sympathize with their rioting neighbors they were sent to subdue, and therefore they always served outside their own counties. They were required to have weapons, but their lack of training made them amateurish compared to the regulars. Um,
Okay, that makes sense. And is roughly about what I was thinking it probably was.
if a man did not wish to serve, he could pay a substitute to serve in his stead. The going rate started at £25 and could go as high as £60.
Wow.
Um, since there wasn't a lot going on in this time period, they didn't really have a lot, like, there wasn't any riots or anything they needed to put down. So they had a lot of free time, which caused them, like, they had free time and they had money, so they partied
Hmm.
and therefore were.
That sounds about like what we saw in the book.
Whereas the regulars were actual soldiers
Okay.
and
Interesting.
a little more. a little more respectable.
Oh, maybe a little because they had like training and stuff. Huh. So the wedding, oh my gosh. The wedding stuff, like it's like seeing Wickham come over and like he doesn't even give a crap. And then Lydia come over and she doesn't even act like anything's wrong, could possibly be wrong at all. She's like, "Oh my
Right.
gosh, isn't it the best thing ever?" And like, "Oh, we were gonna get married eventually anyway, so like what does it matter that I like started living with him beforehand?" And it's like, "No,
Right.
really, Lydia, you weren't. You really weren't gonna get married
Weren't.
until
Right. He was
Darcy
gonna
came in and
like pregnant and destitute
yeah.
with no ability to provide for yourself or your children.
Yeah, that's what was gonna happen.
I
Because
like Lydia led voluntarily to subjects which her sisters would not have alluded to for the world.
oh my gosh, yes. Oh my and oh man. Oh gosh, and Lydia like she just like strolls in and like she takes Jane's place at the dinner table because she's like, "Well, I'm married now, and so this is my spot here, so you
You
have to
have to
move
go
one
now.
down." It's like
Right.
you have no idea how awful your position is right now.
And how much trouble you have caused to everyone.
Right, like everybody, every single person is pissed at you. And like this whole like trying to smile and be happy at your wedding thing, your mother is the only person who that's at all authentic on,
But
including
she
probably your
never,
husband.
right, who never heard or saw anything of which she chose to be insensible, gaily continued.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. This was like these were like my least favorite chapters here.
Yeah, Lydia's. All right, let's move on.
Yeah.
Moving on from Lydia.
Wickham's affection for Lydia was exactly what Elizabeth had expected to find it, not equal to Lydia's for him, obviously. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. And she did it. I was so frightened for if my uncle was to give me away, and if we were not back beyond the hour, he could not be married all day. However, I recollected afterwards that if he had been prevented going, the wedding need not be put off, for Mr. Darcy might have done as well.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
What? Wait, who? Mr. Darcy?
wait, what?
I
And I
totally
can just
referenced this earlier, but yes, this is the reveal.
Elizabeth taking this like double take where she's like, yeah, yeah, Mr. Darcy, everything in my head is. Wait, that was not inside my head. That was
Yeah.
outside my head. Did she really just say Darcy?
Wait, what? Yeah. He was supposed to come there with Wickham. Oh, but gracious me, I quite forgot. I ought not to have said a word about it. I promised them so faithfully. What will Wickham say? It was to be such a secret. It's like, what?
I love Elizabeth's writing to her aunt and be like, uh, pray right instantly and let me understand it, unless it is for very cogent reasons to remain in the secrecy which Lydia seems to think necessary. And then I must endeavor to be satisfied with ignorance. And then she says, not that I shall.
No, she added to herself as she finished the letter. Like, there's been a lot of things that I've noticed like in the last couple chapters that like it'll say that people said something, but really it's like they said it to themselves,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
interesting.
I talk to myself while I'm putting.
And
Um,
if you do not tell me in an honorable manner, I shall certainly be reduced to tricks and stratagems to find it out. Which in this case might
like,
just
I
involve
appreciate her self
asking.
honesty. Like,
Yeah.
I know what's going to happen. Like, I'm going to try the whole straightforward route, but I know I'm not going to let it go.
Like it's really I know myself. I won't be able to let this one go. Yeah. And then her aunt writes back and like she and her uncle are both like really surprised. They're like, "How did I thought you knew about this one. I thought you were in on
Right?
this and that's why this happened."
Right. And so, and I don't know how it's formatted in your version. I have all of these like capital letters in Mrs. Gardner's letter that are just like, um, I had not imagined such inquiries to be necessary on your side.
Yep, those are
Uh,
italicized
if
on
he
mine.
if he had another motive, I'm sure it would never disgrace him. And with it formatted in all caps for those things, it's just seriously like it's almost like her like jetting Lizzie in the ribs every time she does it. She's just like so obviously
Right.
like, you know, she had another motive, if you know what I mean. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Get it? Get it? Yeah. Huh? Yeah. But no, like I like that, and I really liked in the letter. Let's see. I like near the end of the letter, there was a bunch of stuff I highlighted. They battled it together for a long time, which is more than either the gentleman or the lady concerned in it deserved. It's like, look,
Yeah,
they they both argued like a long time, and these people really were not worth that effort, but they did it.
right.
And then I really
But you
believe
know what?
your
I mean,
letter this
that's your
morning.
own niece.
I know, I know. Like that's just like it's cruel, but at the same time, like we all kind of have those relatives, right? You know, whether it's a niece or a
Yeah,
cousin or an uncle or somebody, and you're just like, oh gosh, I'm related to that
yeah.
person.
There's
Oh,
an entire Tumblr like thing. Um, like I think it's like my racist uncle on Facebook.tumblr.com or something like that.
oh
But
no.
it's like we've all got one, right? And when
Yeah.
I can just be like, yeah, my racist uncle keeps posting about whatever on Facebook, and everyone's like, yeah, got that.
Ugh.
Even like my cousins, like I'll say at the family reunion this summer, I was like, yeah, my racist uncle posting whatever, and his like all the cousins know who that is, and his daughter is like, yeah, he's a little crazy.
Oh man. And then I also like the part that says, I really believe your letter this morning gave him great pleasure because it required an explanation that would rob him of his borrowed feathers and give the praise where it was due. I like that. It would rob him of his
Yeah,
borrowed feathers. Like that's just a really, I don't know, like that just stuck out to me as this very like poetic image that like I knew exactly what that meant. And it would take me a page
yeah.
to describe what she's talking about there, but I just sort of intuitively felt the meaning there.
Well, and I mean, it speaks really well of Mr. Gardner that he was like, I don't want this credit. I don't want this, like,
Like,
and then genuinely, as soon as the opportunity came for him to be like, nope, wasn't me, he was like all over it.
yeah, and like even if he had been the one who did it, which he would was perfectly willing to do and would have preferred, he still wouldn't have wanted the
Right,
credit. Like it speaks very, very
right.
highly of him. Which is weird because isn't
I
he
highlighted
Mrs. Bennett's like blood brother?
brother. Right. On the other hand, Elizabeth is the sister of Lydia.
That's true. That's true. I guess it's weird for me because like my brothers and I are all fairly similar in
Are
like in
so
terms of like
alike.
how responsible we are and like the kinds of things that we enjoy and we do and like
Yeah, no.
we're
I
really
was talking
similar
to
and
Adam this morning about like my YouTubers and my ability to I identify my YouTubers by the voice because I listen to YouTube while I'm doing work on the computer. And so I can tell Hank and John Green apart, like absolutely instantly 100% probably from like a single syllable. But there's another channel I watch called Super Carlin Brothers, and I can't tell them apart. Like I I've been listening to them for 6 months, and they are so similar in their interests, in their mode of talking, in their way of looking at the world that I can't identify the differences. And I could totally see like you and your brothers if you had that kind of if you and Ryan had a YouTube channel back and forth, I can see having that problem where you guys have just such a similar worldview. that you just can't tell them apart.
Hmm. Yeah. And then yeah. And of course, Mrs. Gardner then gets in at the end of the letter talking about Mr. Darcy. I thought him very sly. He hardly ever mentioned your name. But
It
slyness
seems to
seems
me
the
that
fashion.
if he marry prudently, his wife may teach him, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did like the, will you be very angry with me, my dear Lizzie, if I take this opportunity of saying what I was never bold enough to say before, how much I like him? And I
Like
was reminded again of that conversation where they're like each of like Mrs. like Lydia or Lizzie wanted very much to know what her aunt thought of Mr. Darcy, and Mrs. Gardner would have been very gratified by her nieces bringing up the subject. And like
mhm.
apparently Mrs. Gardner's decided to go for it.
Yeah. And that's described as bold apparently.
Yes.
Oh, and then later on, Elizabeth's like thinking about it, and it's like her heart did whisper that he had done it for her, but it was a hope shortly checked by the other considerations, and she soon felt that even her vanity was insufficient when required to depend on his affection for her, for a woman who had already refused him, as able to overcome a sentiment so natural as abhorrence against relationship with Wickham. So she's like, "Oh, he did it for me. He wants to he did it because he likes me." But oh wait, no, never mind. No, oh gosh, how could he possibly like me? Because I'm related to Wickham now, and there's no possible way that he could ever do that. No, so I'm nope. It's not. He doesn't. He doesn't like me.
I also love like a sentiment so natural as abhorrence against relationship with Wickham. Like,
Right,
what could be more natural than that?
right. Like anyone would like cut off their left hand in order to not be related to that guy.
I'm seriously considering it, to be honest. Like, if that would work, I would do that.
Yeah.
I cut off Lydia's left hand, then she wouldn't have the wedding ring. Would that make us not related?
Yeah. Oh man.
It's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. Well, and I've been there, right? When you've got whatever it is that you really want to have, like someone you have a crush on, or a part in the school play, or whatever, and you're like, you want to read things as meaning that you're going to get what you want, but you're also like, you don't want to get your hopes up. And so
Hmm.
you're like, no, no, it's not that. And so you're just like, you're looking for everything except the thing you really want to believe because you don't want to like fool yourself and then get crushed when it turns out not to be true.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was one of the worst parts about like high school and that age was like wanting so hard for something, but then also realizing that if I in wanting it so much, if I didn't get it, it was going to devastate me. And so trying to
Right, but you
convince
also like
myself that I didn't want it that much.
yes. But then you also like destroy your chances at it, right? When I'm listening, like there's someone that I really like and I've been hanging out with them and I'm like, "Oh, maybe we could be friends and we could spend more time together." And they'll say something that like by any sensible person might indicate that they like hanging out with me or like they'll invite me over to their house or whatever, and I'll be like, oh, maybe they like me, and I'm like, don't be stupid. Like that's it's just we're just studying. Like don't get your hopes up. And then because of that, I don't act in a way that says I want to be friends with you. And so then they're
Mhm.
like, okay, I guess it's not a thing, and it falls apart because I'm so determined. And so your own behavior takes away the thing that you were
Yeah.
hoping to have.
Yes. Oh gosh, I hate that so much.
Which, yeah, that comes up later. But anyway,
Yeah,
proceeding
yeah,
in
it
order.
does. Oh my gosh. And then like Lydia is all talking about like, oh, you got to go see Pemberley, or no, it was this is with
That was
Wickham.
Wickham.
He's like, oh, you got to
And
see
then he's
Pemberley.
like,
That's great. And she just like calls him out, and he's like, well, then this other
yeah,
thing, and she's like, uh-huh. So about that, and he's like,
right. Hmm, maybe not. Okay, he brings up. I was surprised to see Darcy in town last month. We passed each other several times. I wonder what he can be doing there. Like, why would you bring that up? Like,
yeah,
you're okay. obviously he thinks Elizabeth doesn't know, and I understand why he thinks that, but why would you even risk the possibility that she knows? Why would you bring that up? What is to be gained by that?
Yeah. I think he's trying to get the upper hand on her, or like see if she's still in his camp or not.
Well, and I guess she answers that really effectively.
Yeah, because like she and he used to mesh really hard on their hatred for Darcy, and
Right?
I feel like maybe he that's what he's doing is he's like, do you still agree with me on that, or where are we on this one?
He brings up the old, like, parsonage, and she's like, I heard from an authority, which I thought as good as yours, that it was left to you conditionally. He's
Right.
like, well, I told you that. And she's like, I also heard there was a time when you declared your resolution of never taking orders. And he's like, well, kind of, yeah.
That also maybe happened.
I also like she had walked fast to get rid of him.
Yeah.
And then the next chapter starts with Mr. Wickham was so perfectly satisfied with this conversation that he never again distressed himself by introducing the subject of it.
Right.
Yes,
Yes.
that's what he was.
or,
Satisfied.
or provoked his dear sister Elizabeth. Everyone refers to their recent in-laws. Oh, my new dear brother, or
Yeah.
my dear sister. Or I'm just like, I'm glad that we don't live in a society where you have to do that sort of thing, because like I don't like I've been married for like a year and a half now, and it's the my in-laws are mostly pretty cool people, but I don't I mean I'm also slow like to warm up to people. I don't know that I would refer to them as my dear sister at any point. Yeah. No, like you would
Was
never
that
call
just an
Ryan like
instant
my
negation
dear
from your
brother
wife?
Ryan. It's like I might say that about my own brother.
I might do like your mom, like, hey mom,
Yeah.
but not like my dear mom.
Yeah. No, I
Dear mom with my own mom.
yeah, I no, like about your with your parents. I'm totally like first name. Like for your parents, like for your sisters and their husbands, and I'm just like, no, that I mean, yes, they are legally my relatives now, but like emotionally, they're just sort of like people that I know because I'm married to like their actual blood relative. Like it's and like and
I mean,
I mean, I'm the kind of
some of it goes
person.
back to like when this was all about feudal alliances.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
if the clans intermarry, like you are now in the old days, you would now be promised to go to war for her relatives. Like, if they
yeah,
get into something, you are now obligated to take a sword and like actually do battle on their behalf. So you might as well start liking them and thinking, like, putting them into that slot of people you would die for, because you now have an obligation to do so.
yeah, yeah. No, it's it definitely makes sense why you would try and just you start adopting the terminology, because you're like, you know what? Well, and you don't want to ever have any evidence against you that maybe you weren't 100% all in,
Right.
because that will then just come back to bite you. So
Yep.
leaving no evidence is one of the smartest things to do, even if you don't like them.
All right, give me a minute.
Okay. Oh, people are coughing on both sides. You doing okay now?
All right, I'm
Is
back.
that better?
Yeah.
A good cough
I was hoping
generally feels pretty a lot better.
Yeah, it's not actually clearing anything, but
Oh. Well.
my Robitussin consumption this week is measured in bottles.
That sucks.
All right, where were we? Mr. Wickham.
Yeah.
Totally satisfied with this subject.
Yep, Mr. Wickham's done. They're about to head off. Lydia's all like, like everyone's like, "Oh, write me, Lydia," and she's like, "Oh, as often as I can." But married women never have much time for writing. My sisters may write to me; they will have nothing else to do. I'm like, I just feel like
Such a dick.
she wants all the attention and isn't willing to give anything for it, and I would never be friends with her.
Yeah.
No,
but she's
not
leaving.
necessarily true. I might hang out with her just because it helps me to feel superior, and because I could mess with her, and that could be fun.
Which is basically the satisfaction that Mr. Bennett found in his marriage.
Yeah. Like I would. That is definitely. I have a relationship like that. A friend. Like, I mean, my friend isn't nearly so shallow as Lydia, but like they are the kind of person who is used to being like the leader of the group, and I just love like whenever that friend is like, let's do this and this and this, and people are like, oh, okay, and I just point out, I'm like, you don't have to do that just because they said so. And like my friend's like, stop telling people that.
It's like there's a post on Tumblr where they're like, so if a guy ever hits on you and he's clearly like the alpha of his pack, go for the third in their hierarchy and just screw up their entire social structure.
Oh, now I wish that I could be a girl for a while to do that. Because I would love to see how that works out.
Anyway, I did enjoy Mr. Bennett looking at Mr. Wickham and saying, I defy even Sir William Lucas himself to produce a more valuable son-in-law. That Sir William Lucas's son-in-law is Mr. Collins.
Yeah. Yeah, I did not make that connection. I'd forgotten that it was Mr. Collins who was William Lucas's son-in-law. So
he's like,
he's
I've
got
as good a son-in-law as he does.
Yes. Oh, you're like right up there with Mr. Collins.
Yeah, you don't understand how sick a burn that was, but trust me, that was a sick burn.
That was, you should be calling the burn unit. You should wash that in cold water. Yeah.
All right, which then means we can forget about Lydia and move on to Jane.
Yes, we can move on to Jane and a fair amount of Elizabeth.
Yes.
Although,
yeah.
I mean, how many chapters are left in this?
That was the start of chapter 53.
Oh, okay, yeah. Okay, so there's like another 6 chapters beyond where I'd read today. Yeah. Okay. Because I feel like we should break things up more, but then, I want to finish this next week because I'm gonna finish the book next week. It's gonna I don't want to put it down for 2 more weeks.
Right. I mean, we're definitely gonna finish it because I can't do next week. So.
Yeah, definitely then.
I can't do the week after or the week after.
Oh my.
So we're definitely going to finish.
It's definitely going to be the end. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Bingley arrived, and Mrs. Bennet, through the assistance of servants, contrived to have the earliest tidings of it, that her period of anxiety and fretfulness on her side might be as long as it could.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, yes. And it is hard.
It tells you everything you need to know about Mrs. Bennet.
Yeah, it is hard, Elizabeth sometimes thought, that this poor man cannot come to a house which he has legally hired without raising all this speculation.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know. That was she's trying to just like really feel for him.
Which is legit. I mean, it is hard. And we started off this whole book talking about that.
Yes.
That whether or not Mr. Bingley wants anything to do with this, as soon as word of him arriving got out, everyone's like, "Oh, he's renting a house. He has 4,000 a year. Who's he gonna marry?" Like,
Yeah, like
guys,
just let him just
it's
come
like
hang
the
out.
modern. It's like the paparazzi. Like, you do feel for the people.
Yeah, definitely. And then, of course, Mrs. Bennet calls for her daughters eagerly to partake of her joy. It's like she's like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing! Everyone, girls, come in here. I have to. This is so cool. Like he's coming. Mr. Bennet's gonna be here.
And then Elizabeth is standing there when it turns out that Mr. Darcy is with him, and she's like,
What?
"Oh God!
Why is he here?
Oh God!
Why is Mr. Darcy
God.
here? No one said he was gonna be here. Why?
Why is he here?"
Why is he here?
And so
Is he
now
here for
Jane and
me?
Elizabeth are both like equally like, "Oh God! Why am I doing this? How do I get
Oh
out of
God.
this?"
What's? Oh God. What's happening? Why is this happening? Why are they here? Why are they
Right? And
coming
her
over?
first thought is like, "Oh, he's here to propose," and then her second thought is like, "Oh my God, that is not why he's here. Like, get over yourself."
If only she knew.
Right.
Uh,
Well, and then
right. Well, and then let's see. The color which had been driven from her
and
face
so she's
returned
like,
for half a
"Okay,"
minute, and a smile of delight added
and
luster
he's
to
like,
her eyes as she thought for a space of time that his affection and wishes must be unshaken, but she would not be secure.
which is legit. She's like, "Okay, we'll see how he behaves, and then we'll decide like
Mm-hmm.
how much we should daydream. Okay,
Yeah.
we'll have plenty of time to daydream if his behavior justifies it."
Yeah.
And then he comes in and doesn't freaking talk to anyone.
Right. Nobody.
She's
He's
like,
not like he looks at her and then he just sort of stands around. He's like, well,
And we're back, right? And we're back to the WTF is up with Darcy.
right.
This is where we started this book.
Right, because when he was in his comfortable place, he was like, hey, you're at my house. Come, it's my job to talk to you. Let me show you around. Let me show you my cool stuff. I've got these paintings. I got this sculpture. I've got this cool little river thing. We can talk about fishing with your uncle and we can go for walks in the pond and like we can have my servants come and bring us food and you can meet my sister and let me show you all of my stuff. And here he's like, okay, I don't know what to do.
And okay, yeah, he's not going to be as comfortable as he was at home, but it's not unreasonable to expect that he might be able to like say hi.
Right. Well, I think like
how are you?
Or when she talks to him for him to like respond like a little bit more and like try to keep the conversation going.
Right.
I think it didn't help though that
I mean,
Mrs.
even
Bennet.
if it was just like, how did your uncle enjoy the fishing? Like,
yeah,
it doesn't have to be a great topic of conversation. Anything would do.
Yeah, like it doesn't help. I think that Mrs. Bennet immediately like she's like, "Oh, Mr. Bingley, welcome. I love you, Mr. Darcy. Mr. Bingley, please this way." Like,
right? Yes.
Like she just gives him like the worst greeting ever. Oh man.
Well, and okay, he did try to start a conversation. He's like, how are your aunt and uncle? Which is a good topic of conversation. Like, that's a good place to start. It's something they both feel good about. They both like these people. They can talk about it. But she's like, she just totally drops the ball. She's like, good.
They're good. And then she gets angry that he doesn't like keep talking to her.
Right.
And then Jane is totally back into Mr. Bingley, but refuses to acknowledge it. And
yes,
Yeah, and I think with that I have to go. I've run out of time. So we'll do 54, I guess.
Sounds
the
good.
next time.
In which Darcy continues to be awkward.
Right. So cool.
Cool. So I'll message you about the next time I can do, but I'm pretty sure I'm out for the next 2 weeks. So
Okay. Cool. We may have to break
just
things
finish
up
the book.
into, or break it in half or something. I don't know. But
Yeah,
cool.
I don't know.
We'll see how it
see.
goes. Let me know.
Cool. Have a good one.
Bye.
Have fun at the doctor's.